The wind blew across the empty plains of Arizona as Elias Turner guided his horse toward home. It had been a long day in town buying salt, nails, and feed. The sun was low, turning the sky into colors of fire. His ranch lay far from everyone, just a few old fences, a barn, and a small cabin with a roof that creaked in the wind. He liked the quiet, though sometimes it made his heart ache. Since his parents died from fever years ago, he had lived alone. He spoke little, worked hard, and kept to himself. That evening, something caught his eye near the dry creek bed. It looked like movement, quick, low to the ground. At first he thought it was a coyote, but then he saw two small shapes, thin and human. He stopped his horse and waited. They froze, half hidden behind a rock. Elias dismounted slowly. He could hear their breathing, fast and frightened. As he stepped closer, he saw them clearly. Two young Apache girls, barefoot, their faces streaked with dust. Their clothes were torn and their eyes were wide with hunger and fear. One girl held the other's hand tight as if ready to run. He spoke softly. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." The older girl tried to speak English. "No food, no home," she said. Her voice shook. The younger one stayed silent, clutching her sister's arm. Elias took the canteen from his belt and offered it. They stared at it for a moment, unsure. Then the older one took it carefully, gave her sister a sip first, then drank herself. The sound of them drinking in the quiet made Elias's chest tighten. He asked, "Where's your family?" The girl looked down. "Gone," she said in a small voice. They were shivering. Night was coming, and the air was getting cold. Elias knew he should ride away. The land was tense between settlers and Apache tribes. Folks in town would never forgive him if they knew he took them in. But when the younger girl swayed on her feet and fell against her sister, he caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin was burning with fever. He sighed deeply. "All right then," he said quietly. "You're coming with me." He lifted the smaller girl onto his horse and nodded to the older one to walk beside him. She hesitated, then followed. The trail home was long and silent. The stars began to appear above them, cold and clear. Elias felt the weight of the girl behind him, her breath shallow as she slept against his back. He had not carried another soul on this horse in years. By the time they reached his cabin, the night was dark. He built a fire, poured water into a pot, and opened a can of beans. The girls sat close to the fire, their eyes following every movement. The warmth touched their faces and they looked less afraid. He handed them food. They ate quickly, whispering in their language between bites. When they finished, the older girl looked at him and said something he almost didn't understand. "We clean. We work, we stay?" Her English was broken but clear enough. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. "You don't owe me anything. Just rest for now." She nodded but still looked uncertain. Then she said softly, "I'm yours, if you want." "We stay." Her words came from fear, not from love. Elias understood that. He looked away, stirred the fire, and said, "You don't belong to anyone. You're safe here tonight." He gave them a blanket and a place near the fire. When he turned back, both girls were already asleep, curled up together, hands clasped tight. For the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel empty. The next morning, sunlight came through the window. The smell of coffee filled the air. The older girl woke first and smiled shyly. The younger one followed, looking stronger already. Elias pointed to himself. "Elias," he said. Then he pointed at them. The older one hesitated. "Naya," she said. "She's sorry," he nodded. "Naya, sorry." That day they followed him outside. Naya watched him fix the fence and soon picked up a hammer to help. Sorry fetched water from the well. They moved with quiet determination. Elias didn't tell them what to do. They just seemed to know. By evening, the place already felt different. The porch was swept clean. The small barn smelled of fresh hay. Elias found himself listening to their soft laughter as they fed the chickens. It sounded strange and beautiful, like something the wind carried from another world. Later, they sat by the fire again. Sari handed him a piece of bread she had baked with his leftover flour. It was rough but warm. He thanked her and she smiled for the first time. He realized then how young they both were, and how hard life had already been to them. The days turned into a rhythm. Morning chores, meals, quiet evenings. Elias fixed the water trough while Naya learned to saddle a horse. Sari gathered eggs and washed clothes by the creek. They didn't talk much, but small gestures filled the silence. A cup of water passed, a smile exchanged, a shared look of gratitude. Then came the first visitor. His neighbor, old Mr. Harper, stopped by to borrow tools. When he saw the girls, his expression changed. "Turner," he said, lowering his voice. "You know what folks'll say if they see them here?" Elias met his eyes. "They needed help." "Help's one thing," Harper muttered. "Keeping Apache girls is another. You'll draw trouble." Elias didn't answer. After Harper left, Naya asked quietly, "We leave?" Elias shook his head. "You're fine here. Don't listen to anyone." From that day, word began to spread. When Elias went into town for supplies, people stared. Someone muttered, "Turner's gone soft. Got wild girls on his land." The blacksmith refused to shake his hand. Still, Elias bought what he needed and rode back home without a word. That night, Naya asked him why people looked at him that way. He told her, "Some folks don't like what they don't understand." She nodded, not fully knowing the meaning but understanding the tone. As weeks passed, the ranch began to feel alive again. Flowers bloomed near the well planted by Sari. Naya taught Elias a few Apache words: sun, water, friend. He repeated them clumsily, and she laughed each time. Sometimes he caught himself smiling without reason. One evening, rain poured over the plains. Lightning flashed through the sky and thunder shook the roof. Sari screamed, afraid. Elias quickly moved the animals into the barn while Naya and Sari helped cover the windows. When it was over, they sat by the fire, soaked but safe. Sari leaned against him, tired. And Naya whispered, "Good man." Elias looked into the flames and said softly, "Just doing what anyone should." But deep down, he knew not everyone would. Most men in this land took what they wanted and left nothing but pain behind. Maybe he was just trying to make peace with a world that had taken too much from him. By the end of that month, the girls no longer looked like lost strays. They stood tall, their eyes bright. They had hope again. Elias saw it every morning when they greeted him at the gate. Still, he knew it would not last without struggle. The borderlands were cruel, and men with hard hearts roamed freely. Yet for now, under that vast desert sky, they had found something rare: safety, warmth, and a fragile kind of family. That night, as Elias checked the fire before sleeping, Naya looked up from her blanket and said quietly, "We stay, yes?" He paused, then nodded once. "Yes, you stay." She smiled, closed her eyes, and the cabin filled with the soft sound of their breathing. Outside, the wind blew across the open land, carrying away the loneliness that had once ruled his home. For the first time in years, Elias Turner felt that the world still held a place for kindness. The months passed quietly on the ranch. Elias Turner woke early each morning and saw Naya and Sari already at work. The two girls had changed from the frightened children he first found near the creek. Their faces had color now, their eyes bright. Naya carried herself with quiet strength, and Sari laughed freely when the chickens ran from her small hands. The ranch had not looked this alive in years. The air was filled with sound again. Clinking buckets, the scrape of tools, the crackle of firewood. Elias had grown used to the sound of their voices. He didn't understand most of their words, but he knew the meaning through their tone. When they said his name with a smile, it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Sometimes Naya taught him small Apache words. He would repeat them awkwardly, and both girls would laugh until tears filled their eyes. In the evenings, they sat outside watching the stars, and Sari liked to hum little songs that echoed softly across the plains. Elias never asked what they meant. He just listened. But peace in that land was always fragile. One late afternoon, dust appeared on the horizon, riders coming fast. Elias knew the sound of heavy horses. He stepped off the porch and waited. Soon 5 men came into view, armed with rifles. Their leader, a tall man with a scar on his jaw, stopped in front of the gate. "We're hunting runaway Apaches," the man said. 2 girls, young ones. "Seen anything?" Elias's eyes didn't move. "Can't say that I have," he replied evenly. The man looked past him and saw movement near the barn. Naya and Sari stood frozen, holding a bucket between them. The man smiled coldly. "Looks like you have." He started toward them, but Elias stepped in his way. "You'll turn around and ride out," the man laughed. "You planning to stop us?" Elias's hand went to his rifle, resting against his shoulder. His voice stayed calm but firm. "If I have to." Naya stepped forward then, trembling but brave. "We stay. He good man," she said in broken English. Sari held her sister's arm tightly, her face pale. The man looked from the girls to Elias, then spat in the dirt. "You'll regret this, Turner. Whites and Apaches don't mix, Elias didn't flinch. They're human, same as me. You're done here. After a long pause, the men turned and rode off, leaving dust swirling in the wind. When they were gone, Elias lowered his rifle slowly. His heart was still pounding. The girls stood behind him silent. Then Sari whispered, "They come back?" He looked at them and said quietly, "Not if I can help it." That night, Naya placed an old necklace of bone and beads on the table. "Gift," she said. "For strong heart." Elias didn't know what to say. He only nodded and kept it beside his lamp. A few days later, the sheriff came by. He wasn't an unkind man, but his eyes carried warning. "Turner," he said, "those bounty men filed a complaint. You're putting yourself in danger." "You sure this is worth all the trouble?" Elias looked out the window at the two girls feeding the horses. "They needed a place to belong," he said. "That's worth something." The sheriff sighed and tipped his hat. "Just be careful. Some folks don't forget things easy." Then he rode away. As winter came, the air grew sharp and cold. Snow began to fall across the desert, turning the land pale and silent. Elias chopped extra wood and fixed the roof so the wind wouldn't cut through. But one evening as he worked outside, a sudden pain gripped his chest. He stumbled, dropped the axe, and barely made it back inside before collapsing beside the stove. The next morning, he woke to the smell of soup. His head was heavy and his body weak. Naya was beside him, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. "Rest," she said softly. Sari brought water and tucked a blanket around him. They had made a fire and kept it burning through the night. Elias drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he heard them singing, low, steady songs that carried warmth and calm. When he opened his eyes, he saw their faces watching over him with quiet care. He realized they hadn't left his side once. Days passed before his strength returned. When he finally stood again, Naya smiled and said, "See, you strong again." Sari clapped her hands and laughed. Elias could only shake his head and smile weakly. "Couldn't have done it without you two." That spring, the ranch came back to life. The soil was rich from the rain. Together they planted corn and beans. Naya took charge of the garden while Sari cared for the chickens. Elias built a new fence, and when the work was done, they all stood watching the fields in silence. For the first time, it felt like a home that belonged to all three of them. As the seasons turned, travelers sometimes passed by. Some stared when they saw the Apache girls working beside a white rancher. Others looked away quickly. But Elias never explained himself. He didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. Years later, folks still talked about the story of Elias Turner. Some called him foolish, others called him kind. But those who rode past his land saw peace. 3 figures working side by side beneath the endless blue sky. The girls had grown into strong young women, their laughter drifting through the air. Elias built them a small house beside his cabin, and every morning he shared breakfast with them before starting the day's work. They spoke both English and Apache now, mixing words freely, laughing when they stumbled. When storms rolled in, they took shelter together, and Elias would tell quiet stories about the old days before he found them. Sometimes Naya would look at him and say, "You no save us." "We save you." Elias would chuckle softly. Maybe that's true. One evening, when the sun was setting and painting the sky in red and gold, Elias sat on the porch watching them water the crops. Sari looked up and waved. Naya smiled at him, her face calm and full of life. He felt something deep in his chest, a quiet peace he hadn't known in many years. He remembered the night he first found them, scared and hungry by the creek. He had thought he was saving 2 strangers, but in truth, they had given him back something he lost long ago. As the wind rustled through the fields, Elias leaned back and closed his eyes. The world was still harsh, but his heart was at rest. The land, the sky, the laughter of those 2 girls, it all felt like a gift. No one could ever take that away. And though time would move on, people would always remember the story of the quiet rancher who gave shelter to 2 lost Apache girls, and how, together, they built a home that no one else could destroy. For Elias Turner, kindness had been his only choice, and in the wide silence of the frontier, that kindness had finally brought him peace.